So, just to let you guys know, today's going to be a little bit different than what we had originally planned. We were originally going to have Rusty on to talk about specific like validator technical demo stuff. And today he's not going to be able to make it. He might be able to make it into the actual meeting and just be able to answer some questions. Like if you have any technical questions, he'll be here to answer them. I think he said he might be able to make it midway through. And I guess you guys deserve an explanation. Silvermint as a whole is still a small team. And so right now, developers are very much like all hands on deck type of situation where we are trying to, make sure that we accomplish all the tasks that we are putting upon ourselves. And, Rusty, since he's the director of systems engineering, a lot of that burden falls on him in terms of like deployment and helping out with the node team. So today you guys have me. I'm going to kind of change it up a little bit today, and I'm kind of hoping to get more engagement with you guys. And I mean, an explanation for this too is, in the future, as we start to deploy like version 1 of Symmetry, and as we start to run into like version 1 of Symmetry or version 1 of our Silvermint node, we want you guys to give us feedback on what you guys are seeing at the ground level. So today I'm going to first just introduce myself real quick. For those of you who do not know, obviously I work at Silvermint. I'm on the product team, but I function as a developer advocate and community engagement. So I help create technical articles. Some of you have given me input on like what you guys want to see. So within the next like week or so, you guys should see the first version of that. That'll be like a white paper explainer of Silvermint and Casanova. Basically, it's a Spark Notes version. So if you have like, you don't have the time or you really don't want to dive super deep into our white papers, you can kind of read it and get the gist of it. Obviously, I host these office hours. So if you guys have any questions or if you guys want to see things that we aren't giving to you, you can add me on Discord or shoot me a message on one of the channels, and we'll try to accommodate you the best we can. Obviously, I'm interacting with you guys daily on Discord and hearing you guys' concerns about all different aspects of our business. And, I'm truth be told, like the whole point of my job is to talk with developers and node operators and figure out what's working and what's not. Today, like I said, it's going to be a little bit different. I don't have anything to show you per se, but I do want to hear a lot about your feedback, in particular of like what's working and what's not working. So like if you see something that's working on like a layer 1 or a layer 2 and you're interested to see like if we're kind of going to accommodate that, or what's working for you as a validator and what's not. And we want to make sure that as we build out the architecture and infrastructure that we're taking those concerns into notice and also making sure that we're building things out that people are going to actually use. And then lastly, obviously, if you guys haven't seen, if you're not a part of our Discord channel, for the first few weeks, we were pushing out really hard, like with notifications, but I'm the host of the DGen Valley podcast. So I love to bring guests on from the community and from our team and talk to us about, and to you guys about what we're doing and more or less where's the community involvement specifically in Utah. But that's just because right now we're such a small podcast. As we start to grow, we want to grow outside that. So whether that's like the East Coast or the South or, worldwide, we want to bring people in and start doing content that people are going to start to digest pretty easily. So today, the topics we're going to basically be talking about and what I'm going to be going over is kind of like a Silvermint broad overview. So some of you may or may not know sort of where we are in terms of our teams and what we're looking for and what we're building for. But I'm going to kind of go over that a little bit today. And lastly, we are partnering up with a company called Imperatas. The CEO of the company is a good friend of mine. His name's Luciano Pesci. He's actually has a PhD in economics. He's helped build a few different layer 1 and layer 2 tokenomics out. And we think it's really, really important that as we start to move forward, we have legitimate, subject matter experts developing and building out certain aspects of our business. And we really thought that it was important for us to nail down the tokenomics aspect. And a big part of that is engagement with you guys, the validators, people that are, throwing up nodes and seeing what's working and what's not. So I'm going to ask a few questions and hopefully get some input from you guys that'll help us build out a better modeling system. So, and lastly, if Rusty's able to join, or or not. Any questions you may have, technical or non. There's actually quite a few of us in this today that are on the product team. So Kelly and Allie are both on the product team. So if you have any questions, hopefully we can answer them. So let's kind of dive into it. Silvermint overview, very much sort of like what I was saying a little second ago. We are in a pedal to the metal phase. All developers are developing as, really burning the midnight oils, trying to get version ones out respectively of their node and symmetry teams. The node team is working really, really hard to bring a demo to not only our investors, but our community. And once we get a version that we feel comfortable showing and talking about, we want the community to look at it and see kind of what we've been building. And we also want it to kind of stand as a legitimate, we want to prove ourselves as a legitimate technology platform that we can build upon. And a big part of that is just showing you what we've been working so hard with. And hopefully that'll get us into good talks with our next round of investing. So as the symmetry, we've had Eric on talking the last couple of days with the last couple meetings with these meetups. And I don't know if he's actually brushed over this or not, but we do want to bring some form of a version 1 of symmetry that developers can start to play with. I know a lot of people have said that sometimes it's kind of hard for them to grasp some of the concepts. And we're really hoping that as we start to push out into, public repositories, this version of symmetry, people can play around with it and see what they like. And again, what they don't like, because a big part of this is engaging in the community and figuring out what does and doesn't work. And then lastly, as a product team, we're really, really trying to build out our community right now. We're really, really going hard at it. That's through Discord. If you haven't joined, please join us. We're pushing out daily blog articles in our Substack. So if you'd like, please subscribe to that. It's free as of right now, I believe, and it will remain free if I'm not mistaken. Right, Allie? She doesn't have to answer, but
Yeah, I think so.
but we'll definitely keep that going. And like I said, we just want to make sure that we're pushing out content that you guys are consuming and that you actually like. Same thing, I want to figure out if you guys are actually using our Discord, or if you guys are open to a Telegram, or if you guys think a Telegram would be useful or not. Any of your input, if you want to throw that in the comments or just talk about it, I'll definitely be open to maybe creating a Telegram and getting a good monitoring system in place. And then kind of just some, I guess, some housework. We are hiring developers. So for both the Node and for the Symmetry teams, we are looking for developers that are, that want to be in the space. And as we start to grow, as we start to move into our next phase, we want to make sure that we have the engineers here and the talent available to build one of the best blockchain platforms in the community. So if you are interested, you can either, I don't know if Kelly has a legitimate email address that she's taking those resumes at, but at the very least.
Yeah, I just posted it in the chat, jobs@pyrofix.net. Happy to take that, or you're welcome to let's chat through Discord or any other means. We are hiring.
Yeah, exactly. So if you want to either reach out to us on LinkedIn, if you want to reach out to us on Discord, if you want to send us your resume through the email she just linked, that would be perfect. Like I said, we are hiring. So, and then lastly, in terms of kind of our Silvermint overview, as a product team, we want to make sure we're building out a very good ecosystem. And part of that means that we want to look for projects we want to partner with. I know Jared's in the call. He's helped me find a few different projects. There's a few different projects we've talked to independently. If you are interested in partnering with us, or if you have any projects that you're interested in partnering with us, you can either contact me through Discord or Matt Deal. So Matt Deal is actually our head of business. He's not on the call right now. He actually handles all engagement with projects and new business. So if you want to either reach out to us through our Discord or individually, please do so. So,
hey, Nicky, really cool point that, and maybe some people on the call don't know. I know Kelly just posted the email address that ended in Pyrofix. What is the difference between Pyrofix and Silvermint, and how do they correlate together, just for those on the call that maybe don't understand that relationship?
Yeah, absolutely. So, in a broad nutshell, basically, Pyrofix is the company that we are all currently working under. So it's an LLC established company. We are building out our chain, which is the Silvermint blockchain. Eventually, with the help of Kelly and Spencer, who's our attorney, we are actually moving to a Silvermint Foundation. So that's going to be really nice in the future. Like a lot of people have said that PyroFX will dissolve. That's not true. It'll function in entirety as its own little thing. But that right now, just to think about it in very broad, high view, it's like PyroFX is the company, Silvermint is the chain.
Yeah.
So,
and just to add color to that, PyroFX is founded as a software development company, and they're developing the initial implementation, the first implementation of Silvermint. But PyroFX always intends to be a software development company and not a manager of a protocol, which is what Silvermint is. So PyroFX is not going anywhere. They're going to be very happy to continue to develop software and to manage and govern the protocol. We do need a foundation and organization to do due diligence in that space, and especially do due diligence in the face of being a decentralized a protocol that has some value sets and some regulatory issues that we need to comply to.
Yeah, so there you go. From the word of the VP of product. So the last thing I kind of want to talk about is specifically kind of like what we're working on right now that's very, very important to us. And that's our tokenomics modeling. We're not taking it lightly. We are partnering with someone that has a lot of experience, as I mentioned earlier, Luciano Pesci, and his team is helping us build out a legitimate modeling system. And part of that is making sure that we get good data into the model, right? Like good data in, good data out, bad data in, bad data out. So part of that has been partnering with him and just making sure that we kind of have the right, I would say the right content to which to ask validators and like what's most important to you. So I have a few different things that I'm going to list off, and if you guys could kind of chime in if you think it's important or not. Or honestly, this list is very agile. We can change it up, we can add things to it, we can remove things to it. But the point is, like, I want to make sure that it's stuff that you guys have genuine concerns with, right? Because as validators, they are essentially, the network. We want to make sure that we have legitimate validators and that we are addressing any concerns within our modeling system and predictive modeling system. So right off the bat, we have token value. So obviously, if you guys, very simply put, like if a token's value is high or low, does that actually make sense? Like, do you guys want to join the network because of that? Like, do you not want to, like, obviously there's different networks that spool up at different times with different pricing, right? Like we've seen some spool up at like 10 cents, which some seem to be for a long time, kind of like the standard boilerplate thing to do. And then we've seen some spool up at like $35. And we want to kind of make sure that does that incentivize you or decentivize you in terms of, joining a network? I would like to hear from like actually Jared about this, to be honest, and other people that may have had experiences spooling up or being a node operator.
I think there's a couple of useful things to think about. How many nodes are needed on the network to have it be stable globally, right? So, is it 1,500? Is it 2,000? Is it 100 nodes? And then at that point in time, that's where you ultimately can kind of come up with the cost factor of, like how much is it going to cost? If you can run totally fine off of 100 nodes, then the value can be, a lot higher for those things, because that's a prime position to be in. If you need, if your goal is eventually to have 10,000 nodes, then the cost can be a lot less because you want more, node operators out there. But I think that's a big one, is to look at, how many nodes you need to have like ultimate network stability and network validation. Because if it's going to be a small number, it can be higher. If it's going to be a big number, it's going to be lower. But that's something I'd be interested in, is how many nodes are there going to be there? What's your lockup, right? I know I know you're talking about a 6-month lockup on a node that you would put in there, and I don't think that number's set by any means, but I think I've heard a lot of things that you guys talking about that isn't locked in stone yet, but all of those
what's important about this, right? Like that's what's really important about this is like you're absolutely right. Like while we have a lot of the actual, I would say define it as like architecture, like we have a good idea of like how we want to handle things. There's like fine tweaking that we have to do on our end. You're right. Like one of the things on this list is actually stake lockup periods. So as Jared mentioned, one of the things that will come with the Silvermint node and being able to be a validator is to actually have, some skin in the game. And we don't want it to be what we think will decentivize like a pump and dump is actually a lockup period. We don't know specifically if it's going to be 6 months. We don't know specifically it's going to be 7 months, 8 months, 9 months. We have an idea, but again, that's just kind of what Jared's talking about for those of you who do not know. Kelly, do you have anything more to add to that?
No, not in terms of the lock. I mean, that's exactly right. There's kind of the 6 months is what we've been toying around with, but that's exactly why we're working with Luciano and his team to do some research and why we're talking to likely validators to understand. I mean, I think it is important to clarify, the reason in a proof of stake network, stake is used to secure the network. So the fact that validators, what we estimate right now is the possibility that validators will hold and have locked in stake probably 70% of all tokens. And that's how you, in a proof of stake network, that's how you get, try and manage good behavior, because there is stake locked up. The stakes are actually quite high. And same with getting in and out, getting out with your stake. We want there to be a little bit of a cooling off period to make sure that you don't pump and dump. And also thinking about, going back to something that Jared was saying a few minutes ago, I think it's interesting, Jared, to hear you talk about the difference between your consideration of a network that has lots of validators on it versus a network that has fewer validators on it. This is one of the points that we were toying around with in the conversation with Luciano and his team yesterday is, does it matter to a potential validator if you are a big fish in a small sea or a small fish in a large sea? Is that a consideration that a validator would have when making a decision about whether or not to validate in one network versus the other? Is that something that you've thought about before?
Yeah, typically what we'll do, and I think Jeff can help tell the story a little bit, Mikey as well. I think between Jeff, myself, and another gentleman, Jeff, Mikey, myself, and another gentleman named Sin, I think we had maybe 20 or 30 Bitcoins worth of nodes on a coin that came online. It was called Reef Coin back in the day. And we did the math. So we had spreadsheets and we were doing the math and we figured out the breaking point to where how many nodes we had to have. And this was master nodes in the day, but we figured out how many master nodes we needed to have to where we were effectively bringing a new master node online every like 2 days. So
Wow.
we were able to take the rewards. We were able to then spin a new node online. I think I had like 200 VPSs running or something stupid. It was ridiculous. But what wound up happening is that we wound up killing the coin because we had more coins than the founder and the dev group. So I think we wound up having like 70% of all of the coins. But that was just because we hit that critical mass where nobody could catch us because we had so many nodes that we in that case we won so many blocks that we essentially owned the coin. And at that point,
we don't want that.
Yeah.
So this is where you have to time travel a little bit, right? So you have to look at block, 25,000, block 50,000, block 70,000, and then you have to think of people like me that are going to do the math and try to reverse engineer because I could reverse engineer and say, all right, well, I need to go get an investments of, 50 Bitcoin. And I could then in turn acquire through X amount of wallets that you wouldn't see. Because you would just see, sweet, we're selling all these coins, but you don't realize it's all coming into one.
It's all Jared.
And then all these nodes go online, and then all the rewards are now spinning up a node once a week. And then if I just keep letting those ride and keep rolling them back in the nodes, now you guys are in trouble because now I wind up taking that huge portion of it. So that's the time travel where you have to look and think about those bad eggs out there. Now most people aren't going to do that. It was more of a mistake that we did. It was just we were just greedy and weren't thinking. We just wanted to dominate. And we didn't realize that, holy crap, we just demoralized the entire development team And then we were just trying to dump as fast as we could, and then we killed the coin, and next thing you know, it was dead. But that's the type of stuff. I think I'm really excited that you're working with that group from a real like PhD level tokenomics, because that's the type of math that they're hopefully going to try to do. Is like, you want to have enough of a reward to where you can pay for nodes, and you guys are going to have pretty big nodes. I think some of the requirements are 32, 64 gig. It's mostly RAM intensive and network intensive.
That's correct.
And so with RAM and network intensive, you're still dealing with a pretty expensive VPS or a potentially really expensive physical server that you might run multiple nodes on top of through virtualization or Docker containers. And so you got to cover the cost. As a node operator, I've got to cover my cost of what it costs me to host a node. So that's another really important variable that you guys look at. Make sure your tokenomic guy is looking at the hosting costs for a bare metal server, the hosting costs for a VPS, that you guys would kind of like, would of course be in your documentation of your recommended like VPS settings and requirements. And then there's got to be enough income coming in from those nodes at ICO launch. And then you got to look at ICO minus like potentially 30 or 40%, and ICO plus or minus 30, 40%, that it's still profitable. If it's not profitable anymore, I'm just going to turn the thing off because now I'm losing.
Right. Yeah. No,
so
that makes a lot of sense.
It's got to be profitable that I can actually afford to run the thing. And then hopefully it's profitable enough that I'm also making more profit that I can start banking to maybe work for another node.
The next one. Yeah.
So those are the math that matters to me most, is I'm trying to like work the numbers of how much do I have to pay for a node? How much am I going to make? And then after I've paid my bills, how much am I really going to make?
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. When you were evaluating projects, how reliable were projects at being able to give you estimates on operating costs, or did you really have to go?
They're not at all. And I think you kind of have to throw darts. And I think you guys can do a really good job here especially with the group that you're working with being able to do a really predictive analysis around here to make this a very compelling, validated node to get into. If you target it correctly with, you're looking for 75 staked up or staked. So that kind of tells you what your numbers need to be. And I don't know if you're going to, I don't know yet if you're going to do a release to all coins at once, or if you're going to, if you're doing a reward.
Yeah, I don't either.
If you're doing a reward, there's coins being created too.
Correct.
Right? So what's going to be those are numbers I'm going to care about. So if I'm looking at a coin, I'm going to look at, all right, well, how much did they create with block one? When you launch the coin, you're going to, in block one, the Genesis block, you're going to write into that Genesis block that 25 million coins are distributed to that wallet. And then from that wallet, it's going to be on the chain. So you can see now that's going to go to a development wallet. It's going to go to a foundation wallet. That's going to go to an investor wallet. That's going to be distributed out so you can follow where it all goes. And then what's the block reward? Right. So, and then what's the expectation of how often I'm going to win a block reward, or do I get one every time? It's those types of block mechanics that I'm interested in, because then I can do the math. Yeah. So in a masternode type fashion, right, there's two rewards. So you have the miners that get a reward and the masternodes that get a reward simultaneously. So if it's a 5,000 coin reward total, 2,500 are going to the masternode, 2,500 are going to the miner, and it only goes to one who wins it. So if I now, in a masternode fashion, if I now know that the block time is 60 seconds or 120 seconds, and there is 600 masternodes online, that means every 600 minutes I'm going to win a block.
Yeah.
So I can do the math now that every 600 minutes I'm going to get 2,500 coins, and so then I can map that out and determine, and then I've got to like do rough numbers of that more masternodes are going to come online, because I can look at analysis of how many are online now, and so I can just rough math out the bell curve of of how many are going to be coming online, then it is typically a bell curve, but doesn't go all the way down on the right side.
Thank heavens.
Jared's dogs are going crazy back there. I think it's kind of funny. I just a little side note. I saw in the chat that Paul said he was looking into Reef, the coin that you were talking about a second ago, and it didn't. I mean, it obviously didn't work out because of Jared.
We're the ones who killed it, dude.
Wonderful.
Nice. So that's what we're trying not to do here. Very much so. And that's, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, that's what's so important about this work, right? With Luciano, is just making sure that we get this right.
Yeah, I mean, we'd love to get it right. And, you know, the truth is it's not going to be perfect. So that's why we're kind of trying to have these conversations and trying to understand as best we can what's going to make the most sense. You know, I think some distinctions, so, you know, the work, what Jared just shared in terms of block rewards and master nodes, it's very different in the Silvermint protocol in that validators produce blocks and validate them. And there's no round robin, there's no voting, it's a leaderless validation cycle. So block rewards really are going to validators as they produce blocks. There's a reward for that. And it's not, you know, when it's your turn or when it's the right time.
So there's still math I would want to know of how often.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I think
how often am I going to get a validator reward? Because then you can kind of map that out and like do a predictive analysis on like how much am I going to make doing this?
And it will impact the size of those rewards, like right, because so part of the Casanova protocol is part of the security is as a validator you must produce a block every X amount of time, and if you don't produce a block on that time schedule, then you run the risk of getting slashed because you're not behaving properly. The protocol is secure when all validators in a very, you know, on a same timeline are producing blocks, and if validators that don't participate correctly would get slashed or at least challenged. Like, what's your problem? Is your power off? Do you need some time? Do you want to come back? Or if they're, you know, if they're faced with a challenge and they don't and they can't correct, then, you know, that validator has to go. So one of the things we're thinking about in terms of rewards is, I mean, obviously early in the network, as we're building up utilization on that network and building up transactions on the network, block rewards will be the primary reward system for validators. Over time, however, transaction fees will become, you know, are likely to be, could be, we haven't decided. I mean, nobody's decided yet because we're still trying to figure it out, but transaction fees could become the higher value to the validator rather than the block reward. Does that make sense?
Yeah, effectively like a lightning node.
Exactly.
But Paul, did you have a question? I saw you went off mute.
I was just going to, there's a project I'm sure most people are familiar with, Hedera Hashgraph. It's developed by Swirlds Labs, which I think is probably a pretty similar setup to PyroFX to Silvermint. But they have a really unique approach to how they've assembled a team of validators. There's a lot of people in the like strong decentralized crypto space that aren't fans of it because they claim it lacks certain aspects of true, quote unquote, true decentralization. But I think it's actually one of the most viable approaches to actually becoming a settlement layer for enterprise grade digital agreements. They have a governance council of currently, I believe it is full, and it's 27 global enterprises, various other consortia, whether it's like the London College of Economics or Boeing or Google, these huge companies that, to my understanding, they have a certain time period of which they can be a validator on this governing council. And not only do they have a financial stake for being a validator, all of these different enterprises have plenty of money to run the hardware for them, but they also have a vested interest in the platform itself because they either are currently developing or they plan to develop a variety of different solutions. I shared something in the Discord about this company, MTech, that is developing for the US central bank digital currency, the US digital dollar. They are building it on Hashgraph. So they kind of did the approach where they created this really cool new innovative DLT, which it seems like Silvermint has. They have their own consensus, their new approach to consensus. They're not using a blockchain, which has so many different drawbacks to it. Similarly to Hedera's Hashgraph, they're using a DAG, which offers a lot of scalability advantages. And they had this great product, and they developed so much interest in it by having this great and unique product that sort of all of the validator stuff and the tokenomics and everything was sort of an afterthought. And they've really, I remember seeing them in like 2017, I think, when they first announced the Hashgraph, and from then they've just like gone vertically, essentially, by having this really unique, seemingly optimized for enterprise approach to everything that they do.
That's really cool.
So yeah, I'm just without going too long, I think it's an interesting approach to not necessarily just kind of like look at what everyone kind of does, you know, and kind of force like the basic like tokenomics model. Another project that's really doing some innovative things with staking is Chainlink. I can link some stuff in the Discord too. So there's a lot of different approaches.
Going to be really important. I agree with you on Chainlink.
Yeah, they have something that they're working on. It's a mouthful. Super linear quadratic staking, which is an entire new like economic model to how their staking is going to work. But yeah, so I think it's just important to really meet with people that have innovative approaches to it instead of kind of falling back on you know, things that seem kind of obvious or that like have been tried before and haven't necessarily been successful, and just trying to do minor tweaks. Because yeah, to me it seems like Hedera, besides like really grandfathered things like Ethereum that keep kind of ticking away, but it seems like those are the ones that are really kind of being successful and garnering a lot of attention from enterprises and developers and things.
Yeah, I've heard of HBAR a couple times before. People have actually, family members and friends and people in the community have all reached out to me to tell me to take a peek at them. I think they are interesting what they're doing, but I also think it's interesting all the backing they currently have. Like you mentioned, like they have Google, IBM, Ubisoft, so they have a wide range of prospective places of influence.
Oh yeah, that definitely helps.
Yeah, for sure.
But it didn't. It kind of started as a smaller project, and they obviously have a lot of good networking. But they specifically did it as approach. They wanted validators that had a vested interest in actually developing on their platform instead of just sort of trying to profit off of it.
Yeah. That's a huge issue is building, you know, protocol and ecosystem. It's hard to get both. It's hard to get both.
And it's interesting too that what you're mentioning too. I've heard about the issues with like decentralization, and that's actually one of the items on our list. Is we're kind of approaching that in terms of like the attack size needed to compromise a network, to get down to the, you know, nuts and bolts of it, basically like the Nakamoto coefficient. That's another thing that we're going to be asking specifically validators, like what they find intriguing, what they find interesting in terms of like, you know, diving into these new projects. So
yeah, I noticed I think, is it currently it's a 1/3 takeover fraction for how Silvermint is proposed to work initially.
Yeah, and that, you know, Jared actually raises a really interesting point related to that. Like when you are a truly decentralized network and you might not, there's no determination yet just in terms of governance or how this network goes live. Like, do we know how many nodes Jared owns? And can we monitor that? Like, so there is some risk in my mind, at least, of when you don't know who the node operators are, and let's say Jared has 5 and I have 2 and Nikki has 24. We have, if we don't know that Nikki has 24 and is slowly trying to take over the network. But that's also we try and check that because stake is expensive, because operation costs, they're not cheap. So we don't expect, somebody to try and take over that many nodes or bring that many nodes into the network. For a malicious purpose, we hope that expense might check that, but there is some risk there.
Yeah. And I mean, also, just to add to this conversation, I mean, when we're speaking about decentralization, we're also not just talking about nodes on the network. I think we're also speaking about like where the nodes are located and hosted.
Yeah.
Are they in the same cloud environment? Are they in the same data centers? Like, if you take down one data center, is 300 of the nodes going to go down? Is 60% of the network going to go down? I think these are all things that we're trying to evaluate and try to, put into our model.
And also something else validators will have to think about, like, a root shard that supports commercial scale throughput probably needs to be more or less co-located. Like that's how you get that speed, right? Versus if you're looking for, security through global decentralization, there might be other rewards and benefits for you as a validator to be part of that shard. And so thinking about just the different ways that people might set up shards, if they really want, they could be technically decentralized, unique validators, but all co-located in a single data center. That gets you tremendous speed. But it might not, that might not be the business need that you're trying to meet. Lots of options.
Mm-hmm. To kind of go deeper into some of the attributes that we're looking at as well, I know that Jared and Kelly both kind of touched upon it without actually mentioning the legitimate name, but like capital expenditure and operational expenditure. Basically what Jared was saying is that he wants to make sure that he does the math and turns out that there's going to be a profit at the end of the day. But specifically, we're breaking it down into capital expenditure and operational expenditure, not just for and correct me if I'm wrong, Kelly, because I hope I can interpret this the right way, but like there are definitely people that have the right talents. There might be someone like Jared who has both the financial backing and the know-how, but in some situations, there might be someone that has the financial backing, but they don't know how to actually run. They don't have the systems engineering background, so they might actually have to factor in operational expenditure in terms of like an on-site systems engineer, or perhaps kind of like what Jared has alluded to a couple of times before, is like the iNodes system, where you essentially take stake, put it all together, and then you run a node and then distribute out the rewards accordingly. So
yeah, I mean,
I
a lot of different
right.
models for, you really did. Operating a node comes at a cost, and validators want to know what the costs are. There are a lot of different models for building, for bringing a node and bringing your stake to the network. It's also not for systems engineering wimps. This is real systems engineering. It really needs some attention. It needs, the value prop of Silvermint is it doesn't require bespoke hardware, but it does require hardware, and it requires hardware to be available and online and contributing bandwidth to the network. So, there are certainly costs. There are hardware costs. There are, people costs. There are service costs, and different validators will come to that differently, kind of depending on what revenue model they create for themselves.
Yeah. And one of the last items on the list that we were speaking about yesterday was actually, we kind of narrowed it down into a 3-word topic, but simple systems management. Basically, just how long is this going to, what's the time sink into this? Like, how long is it going to take to set this environment up? How long is it going to take to manage it? And essentially, like, if this is something you guys have experienced before, like, have you ever thought that maybe the deployment of a specific node is, maybe too much, or, the time to, every time I've heard Jared's mentioned this before in a meeting before, that sometimes like when you run a node, if it comes offline, your wallet becomes desynced. So then you have to manually go back and sync it. And that in itself is like a time sink. So that decentralizes you from actually even joining that network.
The biggest problem that I think, you know, node operators or master nodes or validators would deal with is wallets just going offline, right? So it's, you know, that's the biggest challenge I ever dealt with was, and I think it, at some points I had a couple hundred VPSs running. So that's a lot of different nodes for different, in my case, different coins. The problem with that would be is I would have to watch these things like a hawk, or I'd have to have, daemons running that would monitor them and then report back and send me emails or alerts that, this node just went offline. And then I'm like, well, why the hell did it go offline? I don't know. It wound up usually dependencies. I think the last time we were on the call, I was talking to your development. I was like, make sure you give me a list of dependencies. I know exactly what works, because that's the biggest thing I would always fight was nodes just pop online. And then, if you're on vacation or you don't have somebody watching them, or if you don't have an alert or a remote way of restarting it, then it does not come back online until you can physically, remote into the server, and sometimes install everything to get it back online. That's the big challenge a lot of the times is making sure those things stay online. There's watchdogs in place that let you know, but that's on the validator, right? We've got to put the tools in place to monitor the wallet.
Yeah.
It really shouldn't be on you guys, or it's really the validator to have that. But that's the thing we fight is shit, a node's offline. What do I do now?
Right. When you reflect on, that experience, like how much time per week do you think you might have been spending maintaining a node or your farm of nodes?
I was running a couple hundred, lot of time, but if it's one or two, I mean, for the most part, barely any. The only thing I'm looking for is if I see that node, I'm just monitoring it for if it's out of sync or if the stops. I would typically just have a daemon. It's a restart daemon that would auto restart it. And if that didn't work and it still didn't sync up within a reasonable time frame and start collecting rewards, then it would just like text my phone or email, when something was going on. So with one or two, not too big of a deal. But if you're looking at your shared validator services or shared node type services, those guys often, there's one I'm in right now. It's a shitty coin, but it's called RTM Raptorium. The inodes that Nicky's referring to, that service, that inodes, I think they're running like 600 nodes just within their service, shared nodes.
Yeah.
So for them, they're watching. They're watching. That's the whole business. That's a lot of effort that they're dealing with at that point in time. But I mean, is that what service you guys want? I mean, do you want people running that many? And for them, it's all shared. So who really cares?
Right.
And they distribute theirs intelligently. If you start tracking them down and figuring out the IPs on them, which I a little bit for them, they've got theirs strategically deployed in different. They're running on top of a VPS, so they're using a third party. They're running using a third party service. And at least I'm pretty sure I've done reverse IPs or reverse maps on their IPs to figure out who I think owns the IP. So I think they're using like two different IP services, and then or two different VPS hosting providers, and then they're strategically putting them in different continents and different countries all over the place for maximum kind of coverage is what they're doing.
Yeah.
And then they never take them down. If somebody wants out of the node, they use the profits to pay them out and keep the node.
Either buy them out or replace them in. Yeah.
That's their business model. It's not really nothing you guys have to worry about.
No, and I think it's a great business. I would love to see people, doing that with Silvermint. I think that's a great way to, I mean, there has to be a way for people to participate in validation, not just because I'm a single node operator and I'm a systems engineer and I've got coins, but I love the opportunity. Silvermint's not stake weighted. There's not opportunities for people just to throw their coins at validators. But the model that you're talking about allows people not only to throw, to contribute coins to the work of validation, but also to contribute more bandwidth to the network. And I mean, that's really a value add from my perspective.
Yeah, and never taking nodes on offline, because unless they have a massive exodus,
Mhm.
but for the most part, they never have to take a node offline. And so it's just nodes that are contributing to the network that
Mhm.
strategically placing their nodes all over. So it's helping network health. And they update on a regular basis. So if you guys are updating wallets, which effectively is the node, right? It's the wallet,
Mhm.
it's
Yeah.
the node, then you know they're updating them on the regular. So they're well-behaving citizens within the network. So those types of things are
Mhm.
really
Yeah.
I think I would just like to take the time now to go over if you guys have any additional things that we might add to this list. I'll just mention it, like shoot it off real quick. Basically, we went over token value, rate of return, ratio of income, capex, opex, decentralization, lockup period, so for your stake, and then simple systems management. If there's something else you guys can think of, we would happily add it to this list, or take a consideration of adding it. So if you guys want, you can say it now, or you can shoot it to us in our Discord. We're trying to get this. I think we've already shot over this to Imperatuz, to, if I'm not mistaken. Not yet. Okay,
Not yet.
then that's being worked on. So you have the time to have input in this. And I mean, for the last, I think we have 10, 12 minutes.
I'll
If you
add one
guys,
about node or node operators. I've never met a node operator that gave a crap about a GUI. All nodes I
Okay.
ever run have been command line. And then they essentially have an API that we can hook to like
Mhm.
plug in for monitoring. But
Mhm.
everything is done with a command line. Now, there's a couple I've been working with, experimenting with lately that kind of pissed me off, because I'm like, I don't want to run a virtual private server with a GUI on it. It adds a ton of resources to it. I'm not going to see into it to drive the GUI, but literally there's two that I've ran into lately. I'll have to get them, but I was reading through their like deployment guides, and I'm like, this is stupid. Because I had to deploy a VPS with a GUI on the front side of it, which means I have to remote it, and I'm literally configuring with a mouse. I don't want to configure with a mouse. I want to rip the whole thing out, and I want to do it all through a command line, and get installs and things of this nature. But I've never really seen any node operator that does the GUI. So when it comes to nodes, who cares about GUI? Don't prioritize that for node operators. We don't care.
You are in good company with Rusty
Yeah.
and Nash there, Jared. There is no
Nash, yeah.
chance of a GUI.
Yeah, there's no way. Like I was saying, for the last 10 minutes, if you guys have questions that are pertaining to whether it's kind of our tokenomics. Oh, the last thing I want to mention before I forget is something that we're also going to be doing is once we actually have the modeling and predictive modeling done, we want to, and I don't think this has changed for us, right, Kelly, is like we want to give this out to our community so that way they
Yeah.
can see what we've been working on, because we want this to be a legitimate product. You know what I mean? Like, when it comes down to building these things out and taking the time and engaging with the community, like you guys, like yourselves, and getting the input and putting it all together, it only makes sense that the community gets to see what we're building on top of. So we want to make sure that when it's all done, said and done, like not only are our investors seeing this, but you guys are going to actually be able to see and play around with our predictive modeling. So
Yeah, my hope really, Jared, is all the work that you've described doing on other projects is that we're going to do on your behalf, and then you get to go in and validate it and check it out, but that you don't have to do as much legwork, hopefully.
I'll lob one more grenade at you guys. That's an interesting one. When you get into shared nodes, a lot of the people running shared nodes and the pool operators or the shared validator type operators, they are not just for one coin. They are oftentimes running multiple coins. They won't typically run like multiple Silvermints on one VPS or one server, but they'll run 15 or 20 different coins on that one. And that's where I got into like the dependency type stuff, where that gets really important, because they'll run more than they won't just have a physical server or a VPS that's dedicated just to Silvermint. They'll run maybe 4 or 5 other coins on it.
I hear what you're saying. Sounds like a bad idea, but I can see where the dependency issue would be a real problem.
From cost to scale, from a cost perspective, they do it because they don't want to pay for this server.
Yeah, and I get that. At the risk of
if it's just memory, whatever, if it's just memory and network, who cares? You can, it's not too expensive to get a 256 gig, VPS. So they're in that 4, but just know that these shared guides will do this.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
Even if you tell them not to, they're gonna try.
Nice. Well,
Maximize my profit.
that takes us to the last 8 minutes. If you guys have any questions pertaining to Silvermint as a whole, or any of the tokenomics modeling that we're talking about, feel free. I'll let you guys shoot us some questions for the next couple minutes, and if not, we can kind of end there. So.
Thanks, Paul.
Yeah. Let's see here. Well, as Kelly says, silence is consent. So if
we roll at Silvermint.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, for the last thing, I just want to mention again to people that may not necessarily be in here, but may watch this on YouTube, because we have been getting quite a few views on YouTube and through our different mediums. Make sure to join us on Discord, follow us on our YouTube channels. We have Silvermint, the Silvermint YouTube channel, and we also have the DGen Valley one. If you have ideas in terms of content that you would like to see, you can either message me directly, you can ping it into Silvermint discussion, or shoot us an email like old school way. We'd love to help out any way we can. So if there's nothing else, I'll end the recording there. Thank you guys for the engagement. We really, really appreciate it, and we kind of want to keep this going. So again, if you have any questions, shoot it over. So thank you.